Welcome back. Hello. We're going to go over in this video the different types of coils and how to make all those different types that we played around with in our pinch pot coil design. You'll notice I already have my project out, sitting here ready to go. I also have rolled a ton of coils already, so I did some prep work so that this video goes by a little bit faster. For each of these coil types, heads up, for each of these coil types, you do need to be rolling a standard coil to start, and then from there we'll be going into how to do those different types of coils. Something you'll notice about my coils here, they are different lengths. So I have one that's like even really long, some that are shorter, but each of these coils are roughly pinky width thickness. It's important that our coils are roughly the same width. So I'll be going over here how to do each type of coil and how to add them to your project. Heads up, also heads up, you have a couple options with adding your coils to your project. Either you can make each coil and add it as you're going. So say you add a spiral, you'll roll the spiral, add it, roll a spiral, add it, whatever you're using. Or you can roll a few coils at a time. So say you want to do a whole line of spirals. Maybe you make all of those spirals first and then add them to your project. If you decide to roll the coils first and then add them, make sure that your project is put away so it's not being exposed to air. If you are adding your coil immediately, then you can leave your project out and work as you go. So those are some couple options. All right, so before we go over all the different types, moving over here, I want to review going through and doing the standard coil, because again, each different type of coil requires you to start with a standard coil. So I already grabbed my piece of clay from my bag. Reminder that it's roughly the size of a finger. So roughly the size of your finger. If you want a longer coil, you grab more clay. If you want a shorter coil, it'll be less, but you can also cut a coil to whatever length you want. It's better to have it longer than shorter. Just be careful of the size of your workspace. You got a little janky over here when I was trying to make longer coils, and my tiny workspace didn't really fit that. All right, so we're gonna go over standard coil first. First thing we do, roll it back and forth in our hands just a little bit to make sure it's round. I'm gonna get my hands a little bit wet. There we go. And I'm going to, once again, either method, hands too wet there, either method of rolling back and forth, just making sure it goes around 360 all the way around. Or I can have it close to me, I'm over here, have it close to me, and push, pick it up, and push, pick it up, and push. If you're doing two hands with this method, make sure that both hands start inwards, so they're pointing in. And then as you're pushing out. That is stretching the coil outward. And that's what is going to create the length of your coil. What other method you like the best, I kind of go back and forth. Whatever method you like the best, use. Just make sure that you are getting that pinky width thickness. Again, each coil needs to be roughly the same. And there we go. That is a pretty standard coil. So again, each coil that we're going to go over now is going to use a standard coil. So start there no matter what. From this point forward, I'm going to be going over the different types of coils. Feel free to fast forward this video to find the ones that you need, because not everyone is using every single design. So use only the ones you need. So our first coil type that we're going to be going over is the spiral coil. The spiral coil, again, starts with a standard coil. And what we're going to do to get that spiral, we are going to grab our tool bag, because we're going to need our modeling tools and our needle tool. Because needle tools, super important as we're making coils. There we go. So for the spiral, we are actually going to just take the clay and spiral it around. So as we are turning the clay, this coil does like water because you are tightly winding the coil. You can see I'm adding water, especially in the area where I'm going to be folding it in, like so. I'm kind of supporting it as I am twisting that coil inwards with water until it folds in on itself like this. So it almost looks like a snail shell. Starting it is the hardest. That's going to be most likely where it breaks. Once you have it twisted until it's touching part of the clay, we need to start turning that spiral around like so. However, I need to score as I go. So I'm adding score marks as I twist to both sides of the coil. I'll show that a little bit closer to the camera here. So both sides of the coil, get it in focus there. Both sides of the coil are going to have score marks. Before I continue, if you're doing multiple spirals, like you're doing a whole layer of spirals, you're going to want to cut your coils to be the same exact length before you start spiraling them. That's super important. So for example, if I'm doing like 3 spirals, I will have those 3 coils, that would be the third coil, all cut to the same length. So I'll push my, toothpick broke. That's why we have 2. I'll cut both ends of the coils to make sure they're all the same length. Why do we do this? Because these spirals will be different sizes if you start with different sizes. So like this one's going to be a larger spiral because this is a really long coil. And these ones are going to be more medium size. And if I used an even smaller coil, it would be a very small spiral. So spiraling around, adding score marks as I go. This one is again a very large spiral. Most spirals you guys are going to be making will probably stop after it's been curled around about 3 times or so. But you can go as long as you want. Just make sure you are scoring both sides as you turn it. Once you get to the end of the coil, wherever you guys stopped, here we go, take the end and push it into the clay so that it kind of wraps itself right back around. All right, so now I have the spiral, but I do still have score marks. So I want to take my small modeling tool and kind of just clean up the spiral itself, making sure that it is bound together, kind of pushing the clay together as I'm turning it around, following the path of the spiral. Be very careful here because you don't want to ruin the look of the spiral by pushing too hard or too messily. There we go. And then I can take a little bit of water or just my finger or the sponge and get it just a little bit wet. If you get it too wet at this point, the look of the spiral may go away like I did over there. There we go. Just like that. Now, when you go to attach a spiral, you kind of want to have the bottom of it a little bit flat so it has a surface area. So I'm taking it and I'm just smushing down where that area outside curved in. Taking it, smushing it down so I have a nice flat area, kind of like a snail. To my pinch pot, I will add the spiral like that. Now this is a very large spiral, so I wouldn't make it that big if you don't want it to be that dominating. However, I'm going to do an interesting thing with it and put it inside, so that's why I made mine larger. But when you do add your spiral, you're going to probably, with the spirals, want to make a few of them or whatever you're putting next to the spirals, because this guy likes to fall over. If you're adding it right away, just make sure wherever it's touching, so the bottom here and your area right there are both scored, smushed together cleanly, and there you go. So that's the spiral. All right, so the next type of coil we're going to do is the double spiral. So now the double spiral is the same concept. So I'm taking another coil here. I'm going to turn it this way. Push that aside. Same concept as the spiral, except you're working on both sides of the coil. So I'm taking both sides of the coil, making sure that it's not breaking as I turn them inward. Because coils really like to break when they have a lot of pressure added to them. So making sure that I am looping it in here. There we go. And again, if you're using multiple of the double spirals, make sure you cut your coils to be all the same size first. And as I twist, I'm gonna go ahead and score as I go. Now I want to kind of pace myself. I'm stopping on this side. Now I'm coming back over on this side. Because the thing with the double spiral, the secret to it is making sure that both ends meet in the middle. You don't want one side to be bigger than the other, unless you're doing that on purpose. So I'm kind of gonna go back and forth between both ends, scoring as I go. So scoring both sides until they're about to meet. When they are about to meet, make sure you score between the spirals as well, like that. There we go. There's our nice double spiral. So we have to now clean up those score marks a little bit. You should have a space below. You can always add a small sphere into that space if you don't like that space there, but it's nice negative space. I'm gonna leave it there. And I'm taking my small modeling tool now and making sure that the clay is bound together. Pushing a little bit, but keeping the look of the coil. I don't want to ruin all my hard work that I just did by smushing too much. Just making sure that they are connected, like so. And now I'm gonna add just a smidge of water to really clean that up. Twisting that guy just a little bit more. There we go. And make sure to flip it over to the back too. What's nice about the double spirals, you often don't see the middle of it on the inside. So this is the part that'll go inside. So I'm smushing that together just to make sure that it stays connected. That's the area that's gonna break. So I'm making sure on the inside, that one stays connected. See, it broke already on the outside. Smushing it back, keeping those lines. And there's our double spiral. When you go to add the double spiral to your pinch pot, make sure that you score the bottom of it. I'm gonna add to that side, there we go. Score the bottom and score wherever you're putting it on the project. And then smooth out. And there's the double spiral. All right, so next up is the square spiral. So the square spiral, again, same thing as the normal spiral. If you did not watch the normal spiral part of the video, make sure to go and watch it because I'm going to reference things for the square spiral and go a little bit faster. So first off, I'm adding water. If you're doing multiple square spirals, make sure to have a bunch, however many square spirals you're making, have those all prepared, have the coils rolled, the standard coils rolled, and make sure they're the same length. Right now I'm only doing the one square spiral. So square spiral is a little bit different than the normal one, but follows the same idea. As you are slowly turning it, instead of turning it in an organic way, we're kind of forcing geometric shape. So I took it and now I'm gonna squish this side of it and sharpen that edge up. So I'm, oh, you can't even see it. There we go. So I sharpened the edge up here. So I took the end of the coil, folded it in on itself, and sharpened the edge. because I need to now continue spiraling, but keeping that sharpness so that it becomes a square. So as I am starting to finally roll it, I'm taking my toothpick, my needle tool, and I'm going to be scoring as I go. And with the square spiral, every time you create a new area where it's folded, you have to make sure, I'm going to take my modeling tool to do this, you have to make sure and keep it geometric. So I'm kind of forcing that geometric shape with the modeling tool, because it's going to want to stay round. Get those score marks in there. It's going to want to stay round because the coil is naturally round, and as we turn it, it likes to be round. So you have to force that geometry. Keep those corners sharp as you are spinning it. Another way to do the square spiral instead of this longer method is just to take a normal spiral and squish it into a square at the very end. So if you would prefer to do it that way, that is fine. It's just not going to be as geometric as doing it this way. There we go. So again, every time I turn it, unlike the normal spiral that just turns endlessly, every time I turn it, I got to make it nice, square, geometric. This guy off in the next little bit here. Now, if you come to an end like this, you can either turn it around, or I'm gonna cut it off so that it's nice and perfectly square, like so. Totally up to you how you guys want to do it, but that's how I'm gonna do it. And because I was scoring and smoothing it out as I went, you can see that it's nice and attached all together. If you see your score marks, make sure to get inside with the modeling tool. I'm not going to do that on mine because it looks nice as is. But there's my square spiral when you attach it to your pinch pot. Make sure to do the flattest side wherever you are adding it. Wherever it touches, you will score and score, like so. So that is the square spiral. So make sure to score and score wherever it's touching other clay. So square spiral. All right, so the next coil that we're gonna go over is one of my favorite ones because it's one of the easiest ones, and it is the cut shapes. So for the cut shapes, what you're doing is you're taking your standard coil, you're grabbing your needle tool, I'm gonna clean that off a little bit. You're grabbing your needle tool, your toothpick, and you're just cutting the coil to however long you want it to be. Now, if you're doing, I'm gonna smack that into a little bit more solid of a shape there. If you're doing multiple of the cut shapes and you want them to all be the same length, make sure that you line up the cut shape to your standard coil and cut to the same length. So this goes into the multiple cut shapes as well. So I'm just gonna cut some of these like so, all the same length. Depending on your design, they do not have to be the same length. And I'll show you attaching them. You can do a lot of interesting things. So I'll leave this last one. I think I'm going to put like that on my project and cut there. Now, cut shapes are nice and easy to make. However, they are a little bit more difficult to add to our projects just because there's a lot of scoring needed. So I'm gonna pull them apart like that, grab my project, and wherever your cut shapes and the pinch pot are touching, you are going to need to score. So if you are adding your cut shapes vertically like that, make sure to score the bottom here and wherever it's touching. If you're adding them horizontally, Same thing, bottom here and the pinch pot. And the cool thing about cut shapes, pretend I'm scoring right now. Cool thing about cut shapes is that you can build them up, sort of like Legos, and do a multiple different types of directions. And I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of lay that one across. Oh, I don't like that, never mind. I'm gonna lay it like that. Anything in which you are cutting the coil is a cut shape, no matter the length or the size. So you can play around with different patterns as you're going, especially if you are filling in larger areas. Like I have the spiral here. The spiral is going to need some extra support. I like to take cut shapes and put them against spirals and kind of support them that way. It's just an interesting thing to do. Cut shapes are nice. Think of them like Legos. Whatever you're doing, score when you attach. Smooth out the inside, leave the outside looking nice and like the coils. And that is the cut shapes. All right, so the next coil is going to be the small sphere, So I'm getting my hands wet real quick because they're drying out. The small sphere is interesting because you're like, I can just take any clay and just roll it into a sphere, right? Technically, yes, but to make sure that your small spheres are all the same size, we still roll out the standard coil first. And just like the cut shapes, if you didn't watch cut shapes, it's the one right before this. To make sure that they're all the same size, my small spheres, I'm going to take my toothpick, push down onto the standard coil. And once I have cut a piece of that clay, I'm going to line it up with the longer standard coil. And I'm going to cut to the same length as my previous one. And I'm going to keep going for as many small spheres as I need. The trick with small spheres, I'm going to just move those off to the side. Trick with small spheres, you do not want large spheres. You don't want to take a hunk of clay and turn it into a round ball. People like doing that for whatever reason. A, usually makes the project not look as nice, but B, it takes so long for that part of it to dry. And if we were doing ceramics, you would not be able to do large spheres because they would explode in the kiln. Air dry clay is not going to explode. We're not putting it in the kiln. However, I still highly discourage doing larger spheres where you're just taking a hunk of clay and just turning it into a sphere. It doesn't look nice. And that one's perfect. All right. Once you have all of your coil cut up, or as many pieces as you need, I'm going to now take each piece of this clay and roll it in my hand. So I'm rolling it in my hand back and forth like we did with the pinch pot until, wow, I made a lemon, until it is nice and round. This one does like to dry up a lot, so make sure your hands are wet. There we go, small sphere. So I'm just taking each of these pieces of clay. I'm going to kind of squish it a little bit first. Now my hands are too wet. I did great. And I'm just rolling it back and forth until I get a small sphere. And I'll do that for each piece of the clay, and you can tell now why I cut them all up before. Look, they're all like the same size and they look super nice. Yay! So you want them to be cut first before you make the sphere so that you can get roughly the same size of sphere. So roll. So you do that for each of those. I'm going to stick with just the 4 for now. And when you attach them, once again, wherever the clay is touching, score the coil and score the project. Small spheres are really nice for filling in gaps. So like the spirals have this huge gap that show up. So a small sphere is nice to kind of fill in those areas like so. Make sure when you are putting your small sphere on that you are smoothing out, after it's scored, smoothing out the inside. Yes, you will flatten out the coil a little bit on the inside. That's perfectly fine. Just make sure you retain the look of the sphere on the outside. And there's the small sphere. All right, so the next coil that we're going to go over, we're going to go over the arch, and the curved coil at the same time. So the arched coil is pretty simple because you're just taking your coil and you're not going to use the full coil because that arch is way too much. So you want a short coil. So I'm going to take it and cut right through. If you're doing multiple arches, you're going to want to make sure that they are the same length of cut if you want them to be the same size. So I'm lining it up and then cutting the same length. And here's the thing with the arch. The arch is interesting because you can either, I'm going to add some water as I curl it, you can either just curl the arch as is and just make one arch, or I'm going to do two, and I'm going to actually score. If you want multiple arches all on top of each other, so like almost a rainbow effect, I'm going to score them together first, like so. Then as I curl it, I'm curling it slowly so it doesn't break. That arch creates a nice, almost rainbow-like effect, like so. So you can do, and you can see I can grab another piece of clay in there and fit it. But you can do multiple arches stacked one on top of each other. If it overhangs like this, which it probably will, I'm going to take my toothpick, cut through, making sure that they are the same level, like so. Because when we add it to our project, we want to make sure that they sit at the same level. You don't want one side going up high and ruining your look of your arch. There we go. So wherever you are attaching this, you're going to want to score the underside of the arches and score your previous coil or pinch pot wherever it's going. And with the arch, heads up, because of the gap here, it becomes pretty unstable and it will want to fall. So after you've scored it and you've smoothed it out, make sure the inside's totally smoothed out. Pretend I scored it. Make sure the inside's smoothed out like that. It still may want to fall. So you can, I'm going to grab a small sphere. See, it's starting to fall on me. You can add other coils into that area. So if I wanted to put maybe a couple small spheres that fit in there, that's going to give it some nice extra support. Or maybe I want to do a cut shape, or maybe like a really tiny spiral, depending on what your arch looks like. You're going to want to probably fill in that area, otherwise it will fall. If you can get it stable on your own, fantastic. If you want that negative space, that works. Just a heads up, it does like to fall over a lot. But that is the arch. You can use the arch sideways as well if you would like to do that. And you can also squish the arch down so it looks like a folded coil, but it's done using the arch method instead. So all different types of things to do with the arch, but if you fold it down, just make sure to score in between. All right. So same kind of idea, I'm going to clean up my toothpick. Same kind of idea that we did with the arch, we're going to do with the curved coil. And the curved coil, you're literally just doing some basic motions here. I'm getting a little bit of water so that it's not breaking as I am moving it around. I am curling the coil in whatever direction I want it to go. If I want it to look exactly like the diagram, you can just adjust which direction you're going. So I'm going, for me, I'm going up and then down, and then up And the big thing with the curved coil is you want to keep the peaks, the high points, and the valleys, the low points. You want the peaks and the valleys to be roughly the same length. Because you don't want one to be super big and one to be super tiny, and maybe the next one's kind of in the middle. You just want to really pay attention to the length of each of those curves, like so. Tough part with the curved coil, once again, like the arch, is that it has these big open spaces. So this thing's only taken up part of my pinch pot. So if you want it to be all the way, just make a longer one or do multiple curved coils. So you want to make sure when you go to attach your curved coil that you are having areas where it is resting on your project. So this part right here will be scored, attached. Same thing here, scored on the bottom, scored down there. You don't want this guy sitting up like that. That's really unstable. Bring it down so that it's touching. Same thing over here. This guy kind of curls at the end. I'm actually just going to spiral that in. Why not? So again, I would score right here. Once I have it scored, I can smooth out the inside so that it's really on there, like so. And then if you notice that it is starting to fall, same thing with the arch, you can take other coils and kind of fill in those spaces. If it's not falling on you and you like the negative space, absolutely, you can make that work. But if you want to, you can add things like small spheres. Now it looks like a face. Small spheres or cut shapes, small spirals if you wanted to, whatever you want to do, could work around the curve. So the curve and the arch both leave some negative space for you to add other coils to if you want. Just be careful with the curve and the arch to make sure that they don't fall over. And make sure you're scoring wherever anything is touching. All right, so that is the curved coil. All right, so we are getting there. Our next one is going to be the folded coil, So I'm getting my hands wet again. The folded coil is going to be folding the coil. Isn't that, super clever? So the folded coil, we're taking our coil. I'm getting it wet first. If you don't have water, the fold may be a little bit challenging because it will want to crack on itself. The fold is interesting because you guys have some options here with how the fold is going to go. So I'm going to start on one end, kind of like the spiral. And I'm going to, like the arch, kind of curl in the coil like so. And as I've curled it in, I'm now going to kind of squeeze it together. Before it's completely squeezed together, I'm going to take my toothpick and score both sides here where it is going to be touching. And then I can officially squeeze them together like that. So that is one fold. But to get that interesting folded coil look, I'm going to then take it, curl it around the other way. Oh, you can see mine's not fully connected yet. If yours starts to break, you can always take modeling tool. I was going to do that at the end, but it is starting to break on me, so there we go. So I'm curling it. I want it to be the same height as my last one. I'm going to take the score marks, both sides, and then squeeze together. Now you can see I have a little bit too much water going on here and it's making it a little bit hard to work with. So if you notice too much water, just get your hands dried up and your hands should absorb the moisture from the coil. There we go. And then I'm going to go back and forth. So it's up to you guys with the fold how long you want them to be. So right now I'm keeping mine pretty equal. Kind of this medium length here, not too long, not too short. And I'm keeping mine equal so that it looks nice and symmetrical. Smoothing out as I go. And I'm gonna go until I run out of coil. If you want a shorter fold, you can cut the coil at any point, but I'm gonna go right to the end. All right, so now I'm getting towards the end here. If you run out of coil, it's not going to quite make it all the way. Mine is, luckily, it's actually going to extend over there. You can just cut whatever is not going to fit. And for me, this thing is a little bit too long, so I'm going to cut that part off so that it is nice and equal all the way across. Now I have my folded coil. When you go to add your folded coil, I'm going to add, this part is going to be the bottom for me because of the ends here. Totally different on everyone's fold depending on how much clay you grabbed. I am going to take it, kind of flatten out the bottom there so it works a little bit better on my project. And I can add the fold up and down like this, or I can add it on its side, having the fold going back and forth that way. Whatever you want to do, whatever you do though, you're going to want to make sure that it is touching the project in every single spot that it's touching. So all the way across the bottom, I'm going to score the coil and score the project. Once you have it scored, I'm bracing it against my hand. I'm smoothing out the inside. We're pretending I have it scored. The coil, the folded coil, I'm going to curl a little bit so it follows the path of the project. So any of these coils you can actually take and you can bend them so that it follows the shape of your project a little bit better. Up to you. But there we go. So I would have that all smoothed out on the inside. Outside I want it to be nice and coil shaped. You may notice that the folded coil gets really heavy. So make sure that you are prepping your next coil pretty quickly so that it has something to lean on. But other than that, that is the folded coil. We're almost done. Hooray! All right, so I'm saving the last two here. They are the hardest because they use multiple coils. We're going to start with the twist. For the twist, I'm going to grab these two coils here because they're actually very close in length. For the twist, the first thing we want to do is make sure that the two coils that we are grabbing are the same length. So I'm getting my hands wet again. So to make sure they're the same length, I'm lining them up next to each other and just cutting off both ends of each of them. That's going to give me nice equal length to work with. All right, so for the twist, the twisted coil, I am taking both of these coils and I'm going to be twisting them. It's kind of the cheaty way of doing the braid. I'm going to be twisting them. To start, I'm going to take both ends and kind of squish them together like so that I have a nice solid connection between the two. I can fix that up looks-wise later. And now I'm going to take one of the coils, wrap it on top, pull the other coil, and kind of go back and forth in between. Now, theoretically, yes, score every single spot that they touch. Because this is air dry clay and not the ceramic clay, I'm not going to be too picky about you guys scoring the twist and the braid. Because these ones can get really messy looking as you twist and as you braid. So I'm okay if you guys don't score the twist and the braid. Just make sure, I'll show you at the end how to kind of make sure they're attached. So I'm just twisting these two coils back and forth. You can kind of see that action there. Twisting them back and forth. And then when you get to the end, like so, I'm now connecting them, squishing that clay together. So for the twist, to make sure that it doesn't disconnect from itself, I'm going to take my modeling tool in any area that I feel is going to fall apart. I'm just going to add a little support by pushing the clay into itself. So from one coil to the other, I'm kind of just hitting up some spots where they're touching, just smoothing that out with the modeling tool. If you want to be extra safe, definitely score. But again, air dry clay, the scoring on the twist is not as important as it is with ceramics. With ceramic clay, it likes to detach a lot, especially as it's drying. So that's why I'm just making sure that it's really connected, especially the ends, making sure those are connected together, like so. And then I can take water or sponge and just hit up those areas that I just smoothed out, just to keep it nice and clean. All right, so this is the hard part. The twist itself isn't too bad. The clay may crack and break on you. Adding the twist to your project is where the clay will really like to break. So I'm gonna make sure, if you have a spray bottle, it'd be nice to just spray the twist. But right now I'm getting my hands wet. I'm gonna sprinkle a little bit of water over the twist. If you don't have water, I recommend kind of avoiding the twist and the braid because they like to break so much. All right, for the twist, as I'm lining it up on my project, I'm going to carefully turn it around like so. And what you may notice, this is very often the case, your twist may be too short, like mine is right here. Do not fret. If you really want the twist to go all the way around, you can make another smaller section that's twisted. You can start over, or for me, I call that an opportunity. Or I'm like, oh, now I can add something interesting to this spot. Maybe I could put a spiral there, or a square spiral. That actually looks really interesting. Maybe the arches can fit there. So if you're worried about big open spaces, use it as an opportunity. Don't fret too much. But what you may see, mine did that, is that the twist likes to crack. So before moving it anymore, check each of the spots around the twist for any breaks. If a coil breaks, it's fine. You just have to smooth it out and fix it before it continues to break. If it continues to break, it's going to be harder to get the coil back together, and it may cause other breaks. So I'm going through, this is going to be the same issue with the braid. Twist breaks a little bit less often. So I'm just fixing the actual coils itself before I even attach it to my pinch pot or wherever you're at in your project. So just kind of smoothing out all of those areas now where it's touching. I did it before a little bit to make sure that it held up, but now I'm really getting in and smoothing out those areas. And if you did score, it may hold together a little bit easier. Just takes a long time. All right. So now, when you actually go to attach it, you do have to score where the twist is touching your project, both the twist and the project itself. So I'm going to lift part of it up, score the project, score the twist, and kind of work my way around, not fully, not attaching yet, but just scoring where they're touching, kind of pulling it up like a bed sheet or something, just slightly, so that I'm not adding too much strain to the project or to the twist. If you're doing the braid, I'll show how to do the braid. It's the same exact method. So if you notice the braid is breaking a lot, the twist may be a better option for you because it gets the same effect, just with a little less strain on the coils. All right, so once you have it all scored. You're taking your modeling tool and you're pushing down in between to make sure that your twisted coil is attached. So same thing with the other coils. You want to make sure that it's really attached on there. And on the inside, you want to make sure to start smoothing it out. The twists can stay. So like other coils, you're going to want them to be completely smooth. The twist, you can keep the design a little bit more, but the more it's smoothed out on the inside, the more likely it's going to not break and stay attached. So I'm really kind of making sure. I'm actually going to grab the large modeling tool for that. So I'm trying to keep the design. I'm not doing too much because I don't want it to pull up like that. But I do want the inside secure. Like so. If you're seeing those little spaces, that's fine. That's good negative space, so don't worry about those. There we go. And there we go. That's the twist. All right. So the very last type of coil, the hardest one, is the braid. So this one takes 3 coils, and I've got this one coil here, looks super, super long. So I did make a longer coil for the middle of the braid because if any of you have braided your hair before, you'll notice there's always like that one strand that's extra long or sticks out, and then there's like another one that just is super short. For those of you who have braided hair before, it is the same exact process. Same process as braiding hair as it is with braiding coils. The other 2 coils, by the way, you do want the same length. So make sure to double check that. So roughly the same length. I'm adding water to each of these coils. Again, if you do not have water, you may want to avoid the braid. If you really want it in your design, I would recommend the twist instead with no water, because these things love to break. All right, so to start the braid off, I want to give myself a nice solid starting point. So I'm taking the end of the braid, the part that's farthest from me, and I'm going to be stacking the coils on top of each other and just smushing them together to create a solid starting point. Kind of like where it would be on your head. You're having that nice solid starting point. All right, so now the actual braiding time. So for those who've done braids before, same process, you're just braiding. For those who have not done braids before, what you're doing is you're kind of going back and forth, shifting the coils to the middle. So I'm taking my outside one, and I'm going to be putting it in the middle of the 3 coils here. So I'm shifting my middle one over to where the previous coil was. And I'm going to keep it really tight. So now I'm going to take my left one here, and that one's going to be the new middle. Like so. Again, same thing as with the twist. You don't have to score this as you go. Scoring will strengthen it, but it will get kind of messy. So now my right one, my new right one is going in the middle. New left one going in the middle. So you're just going back and forth, changing which coil is in the center. And I do want all of these coils. I started with a little bit extra length versus any of the previous coils I did, because the braid really takes up a lot of coil size pretty quickly for what the final product is. So I'm keeping these really tight. You do not want a bunch of extra space on this, because those are areas that will break. Slowly going back and forth. If you notice it's starting to break anywhere, fix those breaks before they get worse. The longer you leave them, the more likely they're going to create issues. almost there. And you notice I still have that long coil there at the end. It ended up being way too long. Totally fine. No matter what, you want to end your coil same length. So I'm cutting off those 2 excess bits. You're going until your shortest coil runs out. Wherever I cut off, I'm smoothing out together, like so. Now I have a braid. So real quick, I'm gonna check now, adding a little bit of water to the whole thing here. I'm gonna check to see if there's any breaks. I don't have any right now. And I'm going to attach the coils a little bit stronger, just in a few areas, just to make sure that the braid is gonna stay together when I put it on my project. So just hitting up a few areas with my small modeling tool. I can all clean that up later. Just want to make sure it doesn't break on me. Like so. All right. This is going to be the hardest part with the braid. Is once again, just like the twist, is putting it on your pinch pot, the vase, wherever you're at with it. If this is your next coil or it's way up here, the hardest part is going to be getting it on to your project without it breaking. So I'm going to carefully lift that up. It often breaks if it's stuck to your table. I'm going to add water across the braid. And I'm going to slowly start lining it up on my project. And just like the twist, if it's too short, mine's actually perfect, hoorah. If it's too short, that's no problem. You can add a different type of coil, whatever you want to do with it. I'm going to take this and turn it a little bit. I'll probably regret that in a second. All right. Hey, my braid survived. Hoorah. So this functions kind of like a standard coil in which it looks like a ring. However, we don't want to take this off of the project once it's on there. We do still have to score wherever it's touching. Before you score anything, make sure again, check for any breaks. Fix the break now before it becomes a worse problem. So I don't have any breaks on this one, which is very impressive. I added enough water for it to be totally fine. Awesome, awesome. So just like with the twist, I'm taking my needle tool and I'm going to be lifting up the braid carefully, scoring underneath and scoring the project just a little bit at a time, lifting the braid, scoring underneath, scoring the project, putting it back down. That's going to take a lot less, you're taking less chances of it breaking by doing this part slowly instead of taking the whole thing off, scoring all of it. You can do that, it just gets a little dicey. The more you handle the braid, the more likely it's going to break. There we go. Slowly but surely making my way around. Scoring each of those areas. I did run across a break, so I'm just going to smooth that out real quick. And then if your braid, like mine, does meet the other side, I'm just going to score the areas that those two touch as well. I am shocked that actually fit perfectly. Mine never fit perfectly. All right. Once I have it scored, I can go ahead and start smoothing it out. The inside is going to be a little bit smoother than the outside. So I'm going to take the large modeling tool and I'm going to smush the braid downwards. I don't have to get rid of the total design, but anywhere that it's touching the project, I want to make sure it is nice and secure. It's got a lot of good, nice negative space, which is good. I'm not going to fill that in. But wherever it does touch, I do want to make sure that it is secure on there. I'd rather it be stable than the inside looking super nice, because the inside's mostly going to be hidden. Then for the outside of it, I'm using the smaller modeling tool, and wherever it's touching, I'm just kind of securing it into place, making sure the score marks are nice and covered. I don't want to see the score marks in the end. If it's breaking anywhere, fix it now. That area is a little dicey. I may add some extra clay there in a bit. And then where you connect the braid together, if you did, sometimes it leaves this really awkward area. I like to come through with another piece of clay and kind of wrap it around, like a fold or something, or a spiral. I do like to finish it off so it's a little bit nice and neat. I would score that and attach. And that is the braid. So just make sure it doesn't break, and you should be good to go. For all of your coils, the inside should be smoothed out at least a little bit. The outside, I should see the coils. From this point forward, you guys are just going until you're all done. And that is it. So if you guys have any questions, please let me know. If you need to go back through the video and watch any of the different types of coils, please do that. When you are all done, each day, make sure to secure your project. Once it starts adding a little bit of height, it may not fit in your bag anymore. If it does not, use an extra bag or the kit bag that it came in. Just make sure that there is no air so that you are it's not getting dried out. We're going to keep working on this until the very last day that we are together, in which you guys will let it dry, it'll be done, and you guys will have a nice project. So let me know if you guys need any help. Make sure you clean up your areas when you're done for the day. Good luck. Have a good one, guys.